I'm Helen Schell, and this is my exhibition about space and art. My aim is to unite art and science where I possibly can, and as much as anything to get rid of this sort of what I regard as an artificial academic barrier that's been created, especially really started in the 20th century, and maybe it's coming down a bit. It's not to say there are not specialists. I kind of think of it as a spectrum, that there are specialists in all sorts of subjects at different ends. However, there are lots and lots of places we cross over, and possibly a lot more than we pretend. So this show is called The Human Spaceship, The Sea of the Edge. The Sea of the Edge is a sea on the moon. However, it also is a kind of comment that we might be on the sea of the edge of our abilities and ambitions of what we can achieve, not only in space, but possibly on Earth as well. So I've been working on this subject for well over 15 years now, and I started asking, the more I find out about human spaceship, asking the question, why are humans compelled to journey to alien and hostile worlds? Because they really are, as I will explain to you a bit later on over this talk. So the talk is almost in two halves. One, I'm talking about plans for the moon and human space flight, and a little bit about Mars, and then the second half is about my exhibition and my work. So the first half sort of sets a bit of context for it, and then I will specifically talk about what I'm doing with my work. So I'm going to get going. So when I talk about hostile and alien worlds, this is the hostile and alien world that we're almost determined to go back to. Of course, we have been there as humans. This is the moon, basically. This is the south pole of the moon. It's the Shackleton crater, and it is an incredibly hostile and dangerous place. But we are kind of, it's almost like a compulsion or a desperation even, possibly, to go to the moon. We might question why we desperately want to do it. I think mostly it's because we can. But however, I'm going to explain how difficult it is to do this now. So here is our lovely moon, which I think is a glorious thing, and I love the moon. So the Sea of the Edge is kind of about here, and it is actually on the edge of the face of the moon that we see. We only see the near side of the moon. It wobbles about 60 degrees, so we see a little bit more than that. But I'm guessing the Sea of the Edge was because that's what they saw when they named most of the seas. There's 23 seas on the moon, and they named them about 500 years ago. They thought those dark spots were water, because that's what you could see. A telescope then would have been something akin to a child's telescope now, some plastic thing that you could probably buy for £5. So, but then that's what they saw. So that's obviously the far side of the moon. The far side of the moon is covered in craters and sort of bombarded by meteorites and micrometeorites. Until we had a spaceship, you could not see the far side of the moon. You can only see it if you orbit it, or now it's possible for us to put some landers. I think they just about got it, they've put a lander on the south pole of the moon, and they have just got on to the far side of the moon. Only just, you know, this is the South Pole, and they've just about got something down there. I think the Chinese have actually made it just onto the far side. But it is very hostile. So it's got a sixth of the Earth's gravity, and if you've ever seen the Apollo astronauts, they're jumping around. They can jump around in their incredibly heavy spacesuit. It's a quarter the diameter of Earth. It's got no air. It is very hot, so it's around about plus 150 degrees centigrade in the daytime, hotter than anything on Earth, and very cold at night, about approximately, depending on where you are, time of the day, but approximately minus 150 degrees. And a moon day, which is quite a cool thing really, is 27.3 Earth days long, meaning that you get about 2 weeks of this very hot daytime, glaring sunshine experience, and 2 weeks of freezing cold nighttime experience. And this is what I'm starting to look into, these very, very different conditions to what it is like on Earth. So, if you haven't heard, you may have heard this, we have now an Artemis mission to return to the moon. Artemis is a twin sister of Apollo, and it's got, this mission has a huge sort of female emphasis on it. But I wanted to show you, you might have seen Elon Musk blowing rockets up like they're fireworks. However, you will not see NASA blow rockets up. They do not, they can't afford it for one thing. But what else they did, I wondered why the rocket was this sort of strange orange colour, and then I looked it up, and basically this is the space shuttle, which now no longer goes up. But what they have done is recycle the fuel tanks of the space shuttle, which you can see, the orange in the middle and the two white kind of pencil tanks on the outside, and they recycled it into the Artemis rocket, which I think is quite cool, and probably they need to do more recycling. It's the biggest rocket, the biggest successful rocket that has ever been made. So the first mission went up in sort of November 2022. It was an unmanned mission, it only had tech on it, and it had moonikins. So it went round, it orbited the moon, and it was successful, and it brought back lots of data and sort of talked about the tech. However, there was an issue with the tech. So these are our astronauts. So the technology, basically they found out the ventilation system was turning itself on and off, which is absolutely no good for astronauts. It doesn't matter for moonikins, but for astronauts it's no good. So these are the 4 astronauts that have been selected. They are now training to go to the moon. They are going to go up in Artemis 2, but because of this tech problem, it is not going to happen before September 2025. And I dare say with all of these things it might be a little longer, so I put 2025 to 26. So Christina Cook, the only woman on the team, she is due to be the next person to walk on the moon. They want a woman to walk on the moon. I think it, as a woman, I think, great kind of thing. And they want much more diversity. So Victor Glover is the pilot. They have announced several years ago that they want the first woman to walk on the moon and the first person of colour to walk on the moon. However, I don't think the pilot will be walking on the moon, this one, because he's the pilot. The guy in the front is Reed Wiseman. He is the commander of the mission, and Jeremy Hansen is a Canadian astronaut who is going on. Now, NASA have announced this is so ridiculously expensive to go to the moon that they have invited just about everybody, and that's why Elon Musk is heavily involved in it as well, but every space agency and commercial company in the world to try and get involved in it, because they can't do it alone. The first Artemis 1 rocket that went up, it would cost them $4 billion to develop that and get it into the sky. So when Elon Musk blows rockets up like that, imagine the amount of money that he is spending. It's impossible to imagine what he is spending when he blows them up to find out how they work. But anyway, so they should be going up again the next couple of years. Okay, I wanted to show you the south pole of the moon. It's a hideous place. I don't think I can put it. If you were thinking about going to the south pole of the Earth, you'd think, oh my gosh, that's so dangerous and it's really unpleasant. So that's much more dangerous, much more unpleasant. So that's the Shackleton crater, 21 kilometres across, 4 kilometres deep. So no human or no bit of technology can go down there. It is too cold. They have managed with a sort of laser bounce to take a picture of it. The reason they want to go here is because that's where most of the water is on the moon. So they must have the water just water, but also it's also oxygen and hydrogen is rocket fuel. So this is the area that they're looking at, these sites, 13 of them, and that really sort of dark and light, harsh landscape, which is caused by the landscape of the moon and how the light goes on the moon, is really what I started looking at to do with looking at optical illusions and what you might see or might understand what you see. So it is very unpleasant, and also because it's the South Pole, you've got the sun at a very, very acute angle. So there's mountains down there, and the mountains cause shadows that are kilometres deep, long, and crossing this as well. So they've now identified some places that stay in the sunlight for 96 to 98% of the time, but there's nowhere that stays light for 100% of the time. They need that sunlight for solar panels and energy. But this is what they're trying to do. It's incredibly difficult for them to do it. Now, let's talk about Elon Musk. Why not? So Elon Musk has kind of been awarded and this is particularly on its side, because I've got a few comments to say about it. So he's been awarded the moon lander contract for his Starship. However, we haven't seen what the Starship does, so it's got a long way to go before it'll ever get to the moon. There are other people now, I think because NASA started to get twitchy at the idea of this, and so there are other companies making ones that are more like the original Eagle lander with its kind of legs, which is pretty much what I think you would have to have. So I put this on its side. This is 50 meters long. These are your astronauts here, basically. And they come down on a ditch. However, I spent a couple of hours figuring out many, many ways why a rocket like that couldn't land, stand, or launch on the moon. The moon surface is completely irregular. Some of the recent stuff they sent up there, including one that's just 3 meters tall, fell over. Lots of them fall over, basically. So how they're going to stand that 50-meter rocket on the moon, they will not be able to. The moon is covered in glass, dust, and sand. So any huge blasts of heat from there can turn it into sheet glass, and also the dust is horrendous because it is glass dust. It would blow up into these huge clouds of dust. So without a huge infrastructure, that rocket cannot possibly land on the moon. It could possibly orbit, I think it could orbit the moon. The other thing about the Starship going to the moon, it needs a huge amount of fuel. It's huge. So they're technically going to have to put petrol stations for rockets in space orbiting the moon to refuel these huge spaceships. So I think a lot of this will not happen how they're saying, or will happen a lot further into the distance than they are talking about. Okay, so let's talk about Mars. If we think the moon is bad, let's talk about Mars. I personally, from my research, think going to Mars for human beings, not for technology, is at this current time is pure science fiction. The human body hates being in space. It's like artificially aging. So that little spaceship up in the corner is the Orion service module. So the silver bit at the front is where the astronauts would sit. They intend to send 4 astronauts there. And the service module at the back is kind of where all the equipment and storage of things would be. However, that's about the size of this gallery, pretty accurate, this gallery. 4 astronauts would have to be on there for 9 months, spend a year on Mars, and come back 9 months. There are so many issues about it. Mars itself is covered in highly radioactive dust that supposedly, if you put your hand on it, would burn all the skin off your hands, possibly your hand off. So there are lots of issues about going to Mars, but it figures very highly because it is actually the only planet that humans could go to and walk on at this moment in time. And for decades now, I've heard them saying going to Mars is 30 years away. I think it would be fair to say it is still 30 years away. Because the other thing you might think of, just take one moment to think of how much food you eat in 2.5 years. And then you have to have water and air. Very difficult to do that. So I'm trying to sort of set a slightly, see the edge concept of us doing all these things. Of course, we can ask, should we or could we as well. But, okay, so now I'm going to get on to my work. And this question, this is about movement and the concept of being kind of how we might move. And it's a little ironic statement. It's that behind you there. So it's called Worms, and it's inspired by wormholes and that concept that we have as humans, that you could just start, say, here on Earth and go light years across our galaxy or to reach another galaxy. Wormholes do exist, and we know of them only in something called cosmic foam, where they're microscopic and they want to try and figure out ways. But we've never found one in space. So, but we don't know. The theory, I think, is sound. There's some scientists in the room who might tell you a little bit more about that. Anyway, so I kind of started thinking about the idea of movement. I started thinking about a much bigger kind of concept of all the things that are happening on Earth as well. But it is a lot about our compulsion to go into space. We seem to just wish to do it, and it's possible, and we haven't realised it now. We are all stardust, so maybe we're just returning home. But so now I'm going to talk about my work. So I have this overall project called the Human Spaceship, which I've been working on for over 10 years, and it's got a subtitle of Off Balance, which is partly looking at the concepts of being in microgravity or altered gravity. So 21st century space endeavours have resulted in the need for extensive research into altered gravity's impact on visual physiology and perception. The Human Spaceship pioneering project unites art and science through the production and display of paintings of scale, publications using geometric optical illusions. So I have published a paper this year, which I was forced to do by scientists, and it was very good for me, and I'm really pleased I did it. So if anybody's like, oh, this is so exciting, please go into ResearchGate and just look my name up, or the Human Spaceship, and you will find it. But however, if you just want to see my work and the history of what I've done, Vane, like I say, I've been here for 10 years plus doing projects, and they've got a whole archive history of exhibitions that I have done, and an excellent job they have done for me. So, right, I've got 2 slides, I'm afraid of lots of words, but after that it'll be back to the pictures. So this is the context of my paper and research and investigations and the artwork I have produced over the sort of 10-year period. So the Human Spaceship Off Balance, art and science must unite to achieve our 21st century space age goals. I absolutely believe that, and it's key, and it apparently seems to kind of be happening a lot more. So new space endeavours have resulted in the need for extensive research into altered gravity's impact on visual physiology and perception. So how do artists inaugurate innovation using creative thinking in human spaceflight and off-world survival and well-being? In addition, how do we record these great moments and advances artistically? All these things need recording within art and the interaction of artists. And it's really important. You can't let great moments in history go by without the artists being fundamentally part of it. So this pioneering project began in 2013, unites art and science, informing multiple projects through the production of bold paintings of scale, what's in the room, which use geometric optical illusions to express concepts of living off-world, in particular visual perception. Under the umbrella project of the Human Spaceship, they include Moonshot, Woman on the Moon, Upon the Moon, and Off Balance and Escape Velocity. It has been informed by visits to Houston in 2019, where I met with scientists from NASA's Johnson Space Center, the Human Health and Performance Department, TRISH, which is a huge funding body in America, works with NASA for space medicine, and they fund many USA universities, space medicine department. Rice Space Institute as a guest artist, and Rice Space Institute is where Kennedy said, we shall go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. So it's a hugely amazing place historically. And the Lunar and Planetary Institute, which has got fabulous archive materials of all the Apollo missions, amazing stuff. And then also I have done my research within the arts, and I have collaborated with many UK universities now. The human body and mind must be considered holistically, as humans require more than technology to survive in such unearthly environments. Space scientists acknowledge the need for a wide range of human skills to achieve such challenges, but are art, colour and geometric proportion vital human requirements for survival? NASA, ESA and the other space agencies and industries must fund more art and science collaborations to increase the success of these missions. I'm pretty sure we can't live off Earth without all our creative abilities. Okay, so now this goes into more about the visual perception and the research that I have done, which I do believe the holistic concept of it is pioneering. So these listed below are the challenges and the context of living off-world concerning visual perception, well-being and survival. So space is like a giant optical illusion compared with Earth, and there is no right way up, no aerial perspective, and the horizon line rapidly changes with dramatically different lighting conditions. On the moon there is a muted colour range, achromatic, and what are the psychological influences of 2 weeks of freezing cold darkness and 2 weeks of glaring hot sunlight during a cycle of a lunar day? On Mars you would live in a gloomy red-orange landscape with 44% of Earth's sunlight and little heat, constant dust-like conditions with floating orange dust adding a fog-like haze. So it's like a winter's day in Sunderland. So it's not talked about, and I've been keep looking at these images of Mars and trying to figure out how dark it actually is. But it's 50% again away from the sun than Earth, so clearly it gets far less sunlight. Space station living can cause damage to astronauts' eyes, creating far-sighted issues, which they call SANS, which is the movement of spinal fluid. So that's the fluid that kind of keeps your brain in place, and because you're upside down and all over the place, it moves around. This movement goes into your optic nerve, and it distorts your eyeball, and it makes your eyeball egg-shaped, and about 70% of astronauts experience this, and it changes your field of vision and makes you long-sighted. So a journey to Mars in a small spaceship might induce nearsighted issues. This can be linked with the experience of submariners. So I started looking at things on Earth that were similar to being sort of stuck in small spaces. And so they're more likely to suffer from myopia, short-sightedness, esophoria, which is eye misalignment, that's cross-eyed basically, and accommodative power issues, the ability for your lens to adjust its focal length. So if I look here and look into the distance, it takes longer for me to focus. In the muted colour environments of the moon's landscape, in particular the lunar south pole with its vast moving shadows of deepest black and small patches of constant bright light, similar to an optical illusion, do humans need vivid colour stimulants, bright architecture, bold geometric signage, like that, and some of that, and similar to the requirements of the South Pole on Earth. So we have looked at a lot of this stuff on Earth as well. So particularly about visual perception, I have identified these, but I'm still identifying more. In these circumstances, we should consider pareidolia, where visual perception imposes deceptive interpretations on your surroundings, possibly inventing lunar mirages. So pareidolia is like when you look at the clouds and you see puppy dogs and fish, or you look at a crack in a wall and you see a face or something like that. So you've got these weird black and white landscapes, and will you start trying to join them up in your mind and make them into something they are not? Phosphenes, after images and residual colours perceived by your brain, possibly caused by hypercapnia. So phosphene, when you close your eyes, you do not see darkness, you see all this sort of fuzz of colours, because no matter where you are, you will all see fuzz of colours. And if you start to look at it and you turn the lights right off, then you will always see colours. So in extreme dark conditions, will you kind of be deceived by what you're looking at? And after images, with this kind of black-white landscape, how much are you going to see? You look at something white and you look at black and you think you see something else. So visual perturbations are sudden changes in the visual field caused by altered gravity, unusual landscapes, and lighting conditions. So if you want to know what a visual perturbation is, not that any of them put me in the room would have been drunk, but if you're drunk, you turn your head really quickly and you go, ugh. You kind of get that in altered gravity. Also, if you never drink, if you kind of look down on the ground, you get up very quickly and you kind of like that. That's what a visual perturbation is. So you're off balance and you don't quite understand what you're seeing. And that's because, the distance perception. As there is no atmosphere on the moon, there is no aerial perspective. So any artist in the room, and anybody else might know this, but when you look into the distance, things look bluer, they look less defined, and slightly more out of focus. That's not true. Everything looks sharp, and so things might look bigger when they're closer to you and smaller in distance. However, the lunar landscape is so similar that you'll get a misjudgment of where you are or how far away things are. Apollo 14, the astronauts lost their point of reference and they got lost and they had to just return back along their footsteps. Adaption, that is your cone and rod cells. So your cone is about colour and brightness, and your rod cells are darkness and dim conditions. So light, dark, and colour adjustments. So like say if you turn the light off and it goes dark and you have to get used to seeing in that condition, or you put the light on and you bright light and you have to adjust, that will be affected by this kind of strange environment. Spacesuit technology obscures vision by having a peephole with 3 visor layers which also collect static dust on the Moon and Mars. So they are changing spacesuit technology, and they have changed the shape of your peephole, so you can actually now see your feet. Before that, they could not see their feet. And as for the static dust, they've now got these apparently quick change visors, but it is a problem. The dust is horrendous on the Moon and Mars. Something that might put some of this right. Astronauts will need nature's geometric proportions and colours, flora, fauna and geology substitutes as countermeasures, and the stimuli for the 5 human senses to survive, flourish, and for basic communication, visual symbols. This can be achieved through art, design and critical thinking of artists as well as architects. So they are engaging, there are space architects now, but they are somewhat conflicted between the necessity of something that can keep you, a building that can keep you alive, and the concept of actually that mentally you might need something that is a bit more attractive and keeps you sane almost. So here's an example of pareidolia. So this is a picture taken by NASA of the Moon's surface. It's like, what exactly are you looking at? So is it a black crescent moon? Is this a crater or a plateau or a sinkhole? And are these little things, are they mounds or craters? Now I can't see those around the edge anything but mounds. They're craters. And that is actually, it's not technically not a sinkhole because you need water for a sinkhole, but it is a hole. And it's like a tubular hole, and that is a shadow basically. So that we already have all those deceptions. There are similar deceptions on the Mars. on Mars. So now I'm going to talk about artwork. So this is from a previous exhibition I had here 2 years ago, which looked at some of the issues that I have talked about. So these are called moon rocket engines. They were along this wall. This looks at optical illusions, expressing the idea of visual perturbations. So I made them all kind of spinning, so it made you feel off balance. It's looking at distance perception, and they are all done. All of these actually are done in acrylic paint on canvas. You will see quite a lot of them cutouts, and they are not stretched. They also, many of them have graphite pencil on them, and I love to draw on canvas. So here we're looking at, this is from another show, this is called No Right Way Up, and so the left image expresses long-sighted issues, so it is in focus in the front and it goes blurred at the back, and this one expresses short-sighted issues, and in reverse. These are also cut out of canvas. As they're shown here, they're 3.5 meters long. However, they can also go on top of each other, they can kind of reverse, they can go upside down to each other, and all sorts of things, and it makes these really weird movements of space and distance, which is something I find fascinating, basically, that you can just change how you perceive things. Again, this is looking at, this is a moon day, and this is a moon night, and it's just expressing, there's nothing like, it's not a sort of illustration of it, it's an expression of how things might not appear as you think they will appear, because obviously these are flat, but optical illusions, unless you have something wrong with your eyesight or within your brain, you cannot see, you have to see optical illusions. We can't stop ourselves seeing them, basically, which is, so if you're in that landscape and you've got these weird visual things happening around you, those astronauts are not going to be able to not see it. What they have to do will be able to override it and tell themselves that is not what they think it is. They have to kind of say to themselves, okay, this landscape is going to do very strange things to me, and I know that that couldn't possibly be kind of moving like that. However, because we've only been to the moon a few times, they won't really know necessarily what they're expecting to see, so they definitely need to be prepared for it. Here again is some more artworks that I had in the last exhibition. So this one's got after images, the circles, and the one is can you fall up, so that's to sort of destabilise you, and looking at the lack of colour. This one, which actually does look very bright, it's not as bright as that. So that's like a huge drawing, it's 3 meters high, they're both 3 meters high, and that's looking at really double vision and how you might feel off balance if you kind of can't quite see things as you think you might be able to see them. Okay, now, I was lucky, because I do cross over the arts and sciences, and I've been doing this a long time, I find it more and more easy that I can get into places and sort of hang around in places that might just be for scientists. So this is an experiment I did in Bulby Mine. It's a big potash mine in North Yorkshire, and it's a kilometre underground, and it's huge. It goes 10 kilometres at least under the sea, but it's also where the UK Dark Matter Laboratory is housed, because it is a clean place, meaning that there is not pollutants from the environment down there, and they can read their thing. However, it's not a clean place in the mine part. It is dusty, dirty, it's got sort of very muted light, and of course if you turn the light off it's just black. So, so I took, this is Midnight on the Moon dress, which I took down. I was allowed to take it down and do some experiments. So, so this is in a dark tunnel with practically no light, but I'll explain that. So I took that with a flash. It's got high-vis tape on it. High-vis tape is tape that's covered in little glass nodules, basically. Then that's what reflects back the light. So that dress, which has been on show in the gallery, is everything you see is white is grey, and practically not quite everything is that you see is black is either white or it's high visibility fluorescent materials. So it's completely changed by using a certain light and using retro-reflective tape. So what I did here, so we have that close to, bright, flash, yay. That one in the distance, flash on it. The one at the end, this one, was with no light, except for about 100 meters away, there was a tiny little bit of light from an office window. So if you think that you might see, if an astronaut was out there in some very dark conditions, what would you actually think you saw, or could you even see them at all? So bear in mind that's actually light reflective material, but spacesuits are not light reflective material. They will be white. Okay, so this is getting a bit more arty down there. So we had some fun as well, because NASA was supposed to come, but they didn't turn up, so I had the whole kind of corridor in line to myself. And so we let ourselves go. So, yeah, so this is retroreflective. The moon is retroreflective. I think we all know that the moon has no inherent light, so it's retroreflective, reflecting back the sunlight. And although I said it had a lot of glass on its surface, it's actually a crystal called plagioclase that reflects the light back to Earth. And so what's going on here is me and another person, we're dancing around it with light, having a great time. And there was a fantastic George Pinckney, who needs to be mentioned. He used to be a miner, and he had become a facilitator for the UK Dark Matter Labs and the miner event. And he had some fantastic photography equipment, and he loved to take photographs. So he kind of set this up, and it just took this very, very cool picture. And we did have a lot of fun down there. Right, also down there, I didn't really quite know what I would be allowed to take down there, because you can only take down these things in suitcases, and it has to come down in this lift that takes 7 minutes, which they laughingly call 7 minutes of terror, linked to the Mars landing, which was 7 minutes of terror. And you can be in there, and I got them to turn the lights off, so we were all there in complete darkness. The miners move around in the dark all the time, and they don't really care about it, except for when they have to work. And so, but it was, you know, it's like, it didn't make you feel, I wondered if I would feel kind of nervous or scared, nobody seemed to, so that was fine. So I took some basic stuff that I had. I did make a few things as well. So this, which is also that, so that's just a roll of silver paper with black PVC circles on it. Okay, on the bottom one you can see that it's different. That one, of course, above it is exactly the same thing. You can hardly tell the difference between the two materials there. And then on that one, which is the same, but you've got the red, so the colour is kind of vibrant, will show beyond anything else. I did some other experiments with, this is actually a drawing that I did on an optical illusion, but I did some other experiments with mounting cards that was striped, like this, black and white stripes. And so I had mounting cards that had thin stripes, black, white, black, white, black, white. Put that in the distance, in this kind of very muted environment, colour environment, it showed really well. I also had mounting card with white, black, thick white, black stripes, and so and that one, the black just disappeared and you couldn't tell what the object was. So even things like how something is patterned, how you express it, and the colours and all sorts of things are distorted by these unusual conditions. And actually, I had a chance to do a project at Durham University's Bioscience Institute with some psychologists. I had not worked with psychologists before. They were Earth psychologists. They didn't know anything about the moon. But we talked about all these issues with light, dark, uncertainty and colour, and how it would be different in this environment. So it was a fabulous exchange of knowledge. They could tell me about Earth psychology, and I could tell them about the conditions on the moon. And it was really great. That's when art and science is great, when you're exchanging knowledge at the same kind of level. Okay, so I have been lucky, because I do like to hang out with scientists and space agencies if they'll let me. So for 3 years in a row, I have been the only artist who has been selected for the NASA Human Research Program workshop, which is a huge conference near Houston, in Galveston, as in the song. And so these are about 1 meter in their highest kind of thing. So I thought, I could, as an artist, I could, you know, because sometimes science posters, I don't want to offend scientists, are very, very boring. So I thought, as an artist, I might try and get them to take a bit of a look about and think about things in a different way. So this one, which is a slice of the moon, it's like it can exist any way up. So it could be hung on the wall any way up, and it's got the writing round the edge of it. And I was hoping, I couldn't go to these. I hadn't, as an artist, I didn't have the money to be able to go, but I've got some good news on that now. So I couldn't go there and say, oh, take a picture. I wanted them to take a picture and then move it around and see it looking differently. But I just had to take whatever happened. And this one again, it's about 1 meter high. So all of that's optical illusions that I kind of talked about in here. And I just thought I'll just do a rocket. I thought I'd just go with a nice corny thing and do a rocket and show it with its kind of optical illusions and all these little optical illusions at the end. However, the good news is this, I'm going to go in January this year, and I've just today received a grant from Sunderland to go there, so I am actually going to attend this conference for the first time, and actually a UK contingency, and I think we'll include Northumbria Uni from their space medicine department. We're supposed to be having a UK Space Labs round table, and they have never been, no, there's been hardly any UK people there before, and so I think they finally understood that this is really it's a super conference to go to. It's where I find the most up-to-date information about the moon missions and Artemis, because NASA's right there, and they tell you all about it, and it's right from them. And even doing it on Zoom is amazing. You can go through to these, what they call, I think they call them happy hour rooms. And then it's like the most boring, no, it's called office rooms, I think they're called, something really dull. And you can go there and you are talking to a chief scientist from NASA. It's very cool indeed. So I'm really looking forward to going there in person. Right, here's something a bit controversial. I think Elon Musk's rockets, they're rubbish, basically. We need spaceships. So you can't have that. This, if anybody saw 700,000 gallons of fuel a second to launch that damn thing into space, and then it's sort of like it's daft. And NASA are talking about bigger and bigger rockets, and I personally think we have to be designing spaceships and space planes that take off horizontally and can come back and land. So these are some of my spaceships. There are companies all over the world that are now working on some spaceship ideas, but surely it has to be in the end. We have to have things that are not huge kind of fuel bombs, basically. And you know, the amount of effort and things that are required. So, and now I want to say, for anybody in the northeast and further, we have an extraordinary space sector now that's crossing over the arts and sciences. It is, for me, I've been working here and like, come on everybody, we've got to do all this and this and there's other key people. However, suddenly, in the last kind of 2-3 years, this is a fantastic energy has happened. And so I'm just going to mention the North East University. So Durham University, who I've worked with for years, and they've always, the Ogden Centre there, which is their cosmology and physics department, has always worked with artists. they have now just recently got £1 million for a 3-year programme of art and science projects. So that is extraordinary. Northumbria University has also worked with artists quite a lot. They are building a gigantic space centre, and that also is going to include the arts departments as well. So that's due to be finished a couple of years' time. Newcastle University has got a fabulous sort of bioscience department where they're trying to, with the artists, are trying to grow things, and they've got space architects now trying to figure out whether you can grow things in space and unusual material. Sunderland University, much to my delight, because that's where I live and that's why I went to university, they have now started a space group, and it's going to be multiple departments, arts and sciences. They haven't got a space department at site, they've got robotics and AI, and so they're going to bring in the arts, and they're going to bring in their sports medicine, which I think will extend to space medicine in the none too distant future. Teesside University also started a space group now, bringing together multiple departments. There's a history, I'm not going to go through all these, but there's a history in the northeast of a fabulous kind of telescopes and astronomers, and a lot of that, most of that, we start with the Venerable Bede, who did all his work about the moon. However, a lot of the things to do with space exploration, of course, are to do with the maritime history, where they had to look at the stars to get around, and they had to do mathematics. So there's a lot of stuff there. Now our space industry, it is gone a bit daft, I might say. It is suddenly like the northeast has just got all this energy. So Net Park is an innovations park about 20 miles from here. It's got not only the space sector, but it's getting a space sector. So Lockheed Martin now, they've partly funded the space centre. Lockheed Martin are a huge American company, a slightly dubious American company. They do fabulous space stuff, but they do unfabulous military stuff. However, they are talking now, and seriously talking about building their UK space HQ at Net Park. Also Airbus now, which I had not discovered until a couple of weeks ago, has also been up in this area for 20 years, but they're now getting a bit twitchy because Lockheed Martin's moving in. So there's loads of satellite technology, there's loads of marine technology, there's all sorts of things that are happening in this area. Visitor attractions, Great North Museum, Centre for Light, Kilburn Observatory, we've got space activities. STEMfest is a big schools event that happens each year. That's now encompassing a huge amount more space companies and space activities. Celebrate Science over in Durham, which is actually next week, if anybody wants to go over there, right next to the cathedral. They have huge amount of space activities and space scientists there. Human Spaceship, here. We've done some here for years now, and we're always part of World Space Week. So this is Vane, and luckily I encourage them, but they've always done a fantastic job for sort of celebrating space and art together. And then also Northumbria University New Space Assembly, which is led by Fiona Crisp, artist and professor at Northumbria, and that will happen next February, and that is talking about space, but it is initiated from the arts side, basically. So a sort of different perspective. It's a worldwide event. But so it's really proactive up here. Now let's talk about art in space. So lots more art is going into space now, quite a lot. And I'm trying to work on the concept of getting my artwork into space. It will be at that conference. Like, would you like to take a piece of my artwork into space? Anyway, this is Jeff Koons, a very prominent American artist. But as I like to call him, Cousin Jeff, because he was born in York, Pennsylvania, where I was born. So we reckon we must be related. Anyway, he's a very prominent, a very famous artist. So this is Phases of the Moon. There's a lot more pictures of it. It's a beautiful, all of these are little moons with landscape on. and they went up and they landed on the moon in April this year. However, the really interesting thing about it, it went up on this kind of moon lander, the one that was, I think, was 3 meters tall. The moon lander immediately got onto the moon and fell over, and mostly it didn't achieve any of the things it was supposed to achieve. However, the one thing it did achieve was getting an artwork to the moon, which is like, yay, the most expensive delivery of an artwork ever. Also, there are 2 other known pieces of art on the moon. There's a tiny little astronaut called the Fallen Astronaut, which went up on the Apollo mission. And then there's a sort of slightly mythological, but I think it's up there, a little ceramic chip that has got images by Andy Warhol, Robert Rauschenberg, and a few other artists that are supposed to be left on the moon of the Apollo missions. So art is going into space. This is the end now, so highlights. I just wanted to say the project, it started in 2013 and it aimed really to unite art and science with the vision and realization of human civilization in space. But I asked a question, and we're going to have a little discussion. Should we do this? And even can we? It's so difficult and expensive. So if you want to look at more of this, the research papers been printed by the British Planetary Society and is on ResearchGate with the posters and a few other articles. So yeah, I've been very lucky. I have to say I've tried really hard, but I have managed to work with these people and visit them. NASA, it has to say, is a real open door place. I was quite surprised. And they even, I met these kind of the chief of the human space flight and health, and they wanted to have a discussion about art. And I was like, no, let's talk about space. But anyway, so that's good. And I won, actually 3 times, I won the Arthur Clarke Award for Space Outreach, once as an individual and twice as part of teams. So the British Interplanetary Society are very arty. Their concept when they were started by Arthur C. Clarke, Ralph Smith, who was an engineer and artist, some poets and writers and scientists and engineers. So they've always had that premise. They're excellent, and they forced me, British Interplanetary Society, all these guys who are all 80 plus, made me write my paper, which I was delighted that they did. Yeah, I'm the only, I'm registered space industry, I'm the only artist as far as I know. I presented posters. Also, for those who don't know, which is I haven't actually mentioned on my map, is the Aldrin Foundation, as in Buzz Aldrin, has now got a strong link with Sunderland University, and they are doing outreach projects together, which is like extraordinary, basically. So I met him. Andy Aldrin, the son of Buzz, he came to one of my exhibitions in Sunderland, which was excellent. I partner with all science organisations and many universities, and work with them, and it's a fabulous thing. And I think that's it. So we probably have the lights on now. So if anybody's got any questions, or would like to just comment on what they feel about space exploration and whether we should, could, or just questions. Yep?
Sort of half-formed one, but I've got a sense of maybe a vibe of that NASA was the idea of sort of like the next people to walk in the moon, it should be more diverse. But I think with that is perhaps something really inherently exclusive, because in the first part of your talk you mentioned in terms of like non-local time on the moon and like a year being the equivalent of a month.
Yeah.
Just to say, for example, if somebody was like practice Islam and they pray like every Friday, right, morning prayers, then if you like converted that would be praying at such a rate that would be sort of very difficult to manage. I mean, several times a day, which would inherently get in the way of being a functional astronaut. So, I mean, I wonder how that would work, and also how somebody would sort of.
Well, there are Muslim astronauts that go to the International Space Station, and on the International Space Station, a day is actually 90 minutes because it goes around the Earth so quickly. So I don't know actually, because obviously I'm not actually a religious person, so I don't know how they do that. Because a lot of astronauts do believe in a God, because they kind of go there and they think it's so extraordinary that they kind of think this experience can only happen with some sort of huge and extra being. And also, a lot of the Apollo astronauts came back. They did believe Christian gods, and they did believe in it. And they got very spiritual. They didn't know how to quite deal with it. And some of them became artists, though. That's how they dealt with it. And some astronauts do deal with it, because it is that big a question. But however, I mean, you know, Iran has sent astronauts, and several other totally Muslim countries have sent astronauts. So they obviously are doing it and going to places, but I don't know how they sort of deal with it within their own religious beliefs. That I don't know about, basically, or how they would. But it would be difficult, because I bet you they would want to go to the moon.
The sort of the second part of my question, if it's okay, is that given the first part was sort of about related with spirituality and sort of it's possible compatibility with sort of geometry or spatial geometry being imagined in earlier spiritualities. But I just wonder how whether there was a sense of that work, so it was sort of like a sense of maybe precision, and there was it's
I don't know, I have to say the sacred geometry, which I was sort of mentioning, but I tend to use it as geometry of nature, it does refer, it's how physics works. You know, it's like, because it has been used in all religions, whatever it is across this world, and it's been a universal language. And actually I used to do a lot of work about that, and it's partly how it sort of led me in to changing to space technology. And then weirdly I come back round again thinking, you might need all those things just because they're so inherent within our human being. But there is something else, that there is also tribes and groups on Earth that believe the moon is sacred, and they believe the spirits of their ancestors go to the moon. And there's a lot of protest about the idea that they want to do all these things on the moon, because they think, well, that's our sacred land. I personally, I would find that very difficult, that you could claim, because humans always wanting to claim the moon or anything out there. It's not ours. You know, people can, oh well, we own it. I did hear a space scientist, a lunar scientist say, well, it's ours, that we belong, the moon belongs to us, we can do what we like. And I even heard someone who was talking about Mars a year ago, and ironically I'm going to have to do a talk at the same time she's doing her talk, and she was, we're human beings, we can do what we like and nobody else is there, so we can do what we like when we go into space, and it doesn't matter what it is. However, that everybody in the room just went kind of like that when she said it, and luckily we can't really get very far. I mean, it's true, we just can't, it's like, yeah, we can do what we like, but actually we can't. So, but we are polluting, we're polluting like we always do. The moon's covered in space junk. Mars has now got a lot of stuff, and our furthest piece of space junk is one of the Voyager missions that's left our immediate solar system. So we do send all this stuff out there, and I don't know, we have to question it at some point of how much we can do all of this stuff and how dangerous it is.
Yeah, I actually had a question about that, because I think I read an article yesterday that Elon Musk asked for permission to send another 30,000 Starlink satellites to the lower orbit, which is obviously becoming, it's obstructing our visibility, and it will make future space travel very hard if we can't.
Yeah, they do say if too many go up, then we won't be able to send rockets up, because they're all
exactly.
Until about 10 years ago, there was pretty much only 1,500 satellites going around our Earth. And now, I think it's
I
more
think
than
it was
10,000.
4 years ago, it was still 4,000,
Yeah.
and now it's close. It's gonna be close to like 150,000 in a space of a year, 2 years.
You can see them now. Somebody told me in the Forest of Dean that you could see the satellites going past. And I was thinking, I don't think you can. And then walking back from the pub, not drunk, I'm like, well, there they bloody well are. I've had these flashes in the sky that are nothing else but satellites, either catching the sun. I can't tell whether it was catching the sun or whether they were firing their boosters to send them up into a higher orbit. But there they were, and there is a scientist in Durham, James Osborne, who's working on that kind of visual pollution of satellites.
That's the other thing, because like my background is in cultural studies, and actually in that article, someone very, very beautifully used the word of the expression of the cultural heritage, saying that the original night sky is something of a cultural heritage which is lost because of the light pollution, because of the satellites, that we do not see the sky as we see it, and not only because of light.
But I guess we've always checked, because if you think of having bigger and better telescopes at Naples, but we could have, there's a couple of things that might change all that. There's the Kessler effect, which is this domino effect that if one goes off, then it will just go like and bash them all, take them all out. And then of course, the real big thing is if there's a solar flare that comes towards us, that will just, they're gone, mate. So we might return, and all your phones will be gone.
When you're talking about the various optical effects on the moon, pareidolia, etc., do you know if NASA are training lunars in black and white photography?
Well, they would have used black and white photography.
No, but there's a technique, pre-visualization. I was trained with it. It's basically what uses the zone system. So you map everything out into an art and one colour. The more you do it, the more you're able to shut your cone input on and deal with the rods. So basically, in the first instance, should be teaching on that because it's primarily an achromatic circuit like visual experience. But also, in any areas that are actually being inhabited, they should actually do simulations of them and get them used to the environment by immersive.
They are doing now, and it's quite recent though, but ESA now has a lunar immersive environment, and a company called Astrobotics in Philadelphia has just created a big immersive
but it'll only work if they have the neural sort of connections to work in tonality rather than colouring.
I went to a lot of things about colour blindness. And where
basically when you're on the moon, you're going to lose your cone facility unless, like you suggest, you have a lot of vivid coloration. You're going to lose that.
You're going to have to have, I think, and also journey to Mars, you're going to have to do all these visual exercises. I'm sure of it. I have to say, I'm saying it as someone who can't, but I am I'm presenting this stuff to them as well.
And it seems obvious from an artistic point of view.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing is, they're scientists. They've had that beaten out of them. Specialisation is such that you have to exclude everything else but what you're doing.
I think what's coming around to now, and the reason there is this kind of big kind of change into looking at art and science, that there is definitely a change. Because all the American commercial space companies absolutely work on the premise of space for all, and many of them are working with artists. However, I do not think they're actually working with them in a research way yet, and that's what I am trying to get them to do.
Trying to practically create a new field.
Or just merging where you sort of unite ideas. But I think it will be necessary. It's so difficult to do this. I think they do sort of talk about drawing on all the strengths of humanity and all the skills of humanity. I don't think they have quite done it. Anyway, I will be there with my patient. I will be there with my patient,
I mean, the one other thing I wanted to ask about pareidolia. I'm an abstract artist, abstract photographer. And pareidolia drives me mad. When I have an exhibition, I mean, my last exhibition was in Gozo, abstract Gozo, and I was there most of the times when people came in and asked me. And one guy who was a farmer saw a tractor, right? Because obviously he has a lot of good tractors now. I've been thinking about pareidolia for a while, and basically what pareidolia strikes me as is your brain essentially going through a visual library, cycling through it, and compare and contrast. So I did some experiments and I worked out you can actually exhaust pareidolia after about a minute 30 seconds. That's how long it takes to cycle through it until the brain just says, no, there's nothing, I have nothing in here.
It's an abstract.
And then that's when you get the precognitive cut through. That's when you get that moment. You know? So the thing is, basically, if there are issues with pareidolia, they need to train them, and they need to have facilities whereby they set up a neuron connections, whereby they instantly know.
Well, I think we're in agreement on that, but it's whether they sort of accept that they are going to... I genuinely believe my presentation and how I brought it together, presented it, is pioneering, because I've been looking at...
Well, the question that they don't seem to even anticipate. They're just...
They're too busy trying to get those big rockets into space.
The problem is they're so fixated on physical survival. They're going to plant some poor bastards up there.
Oh, we don't know.
They're going insane.
We might have changed all that.
You know, they're going to lose their heads because they're going to be hallucinating,
Well, I think so, but we'll find out about it.
It'll be ground controlled near the top.
There was another question here, but we're in agreement on most of that.
I thought I have a quick two-part question. First of all, you talk about sending into space. About sending artists into space, about famous land remember it's called a poet, and you go if they try to get there.
I do lots of work with 10-year-olds, and they always ask, and sometimes they think I am an astronaut or a rocket scientist, and I never like to tell them I'm not. I would not go to Mars. No way, thank you. And I have to say, I'm too old to be an astronaut. However, I probably would. William T, Star Trek, they went up at 90. And then Wally Funk, what a great name. There's a woman who wanted to be an astronaut, and they cut the training program, which was 80. So, because I would have said, I might not be well enough, but actually a 90-year-old can go up, I'm reckoning I could. The American space companies have all said space is for all. And they absolutely intend, and part of it's to do with money and tourism and things, but they started on that premise. It's trying to get the UK space people to have that same concept. There's another question at the back. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you ever thought about whether space was terrestrial.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by?
Can you actually go there?
Oh, can you? Does it actually exist?
I'm saying, can you actually go to the moon? Is it a terrestrial object, or is it something else?
I'm not quite sure. It is a rocky object, and we have been to the moon. Well, because they went to the moon.
But I'm saying, have you had a question?
Did I might question it? No. I'll tell you something. It's all right to ask the question. Basically, obviously, lots of people thought it was a hoax.
It's not a dig, I'm just saying, how do you actually know that it's terrestrial?
Because they went there.
Did it?
Yeah,
How do you know? That's what I'm saying. Either way, I'm not bothered. I'm just saying, have you ever questioned the idea that space is not somewhere that you can go?
Oh, right, no, I never have, because we've been there, there's too much proof now.
There's too much science.
Yeah, but however, on your thing, because lots of people ask me, they don't do it so much, about moon hoaxes, I did devise my own moon hoax to please the moon hoaxers, which is also on ResearchGate if you want to read my moon hoax. Yeah.
Just a quick one. How's your relationship with British Barry's work? How to hear that?
No, I didn't.
How's your relationship with British Barry's work? Would you when you maybe wrote stuff about this whole specific context?
And my relationship with what?
With Bridget Riley's paintings.
Oh, Bridget Riley, good, yeah, no, good.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. So in the 60s, there wasn't only her, there was hundreds of them all over the world doing these black and white optical illusion things. Bridget Riley said, my work is not about science, it's nothing to do with science or space, because she's been asked it a long time. I know it's difficult to dispute what someone else said about their own work. However, she was surrounded by all these things that were happening to her. And the fact that there were many artists around the world doing these optical art and optical illusion, she's one of the most famous ones doing it, but I now know that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of artists around the world doing this. So I love her work, and I look at it, and sometimes I take her ideas, I try not to make them look like her work. I do have some smaller work that possibly does, and I've gone to her shows, but I kind of look at them and I try and extend any of those ideas. But I think her work is beautiful, basically. And but like I say, since I've been doing it, I found out there are many, many more artists. There was a whole movement across the world that they were doing this, and there are some other extraordinary artists who were doing these techniques as well. And there are optical illusion artists now, but
But also the painting about the physicality of paint and the emotion put into paint, not the visual.
And technology of the time, because it was the first time, they didn't call it acrylics then, but it's the first time acrylic paints, plastic paints, were used and enabled her to do all those sharp and bold things very quickly like that as well. I think there's another, yes?
Have any astronauts seen your work, and if they have, what do they say about it? Does it reflect their experiences in space?
Astronaut, they haven't seen it for real. Andy Aldrin came to my exhibition, The Son of Buzz, and he really liked it. It was all spaceships when he came, and there was a big red rocket, and he said, well, I kind of understand that one, but I'm not sure about something. And I got a fabulous picture of it. And so he did, and I'm on the Aldrin, they have an art space site for artists, so I'm on that. So they fully embrace art and STEAM education. So but something I do with astronauts, when I can get my hands on one, is I get them to draw pictures for me. Yeah, they're rubbish at drawing pictures. However, they're brilliant at being astronauts. But I love that they like to do it. They're quite creative and quite arty. Yeah.
On that topic, as we talk about art in space, art about space, do we have any art that was made in space?
Yes.
Is it good?
No. No, actually, there is some stuff in Northumbria University. If you meet Fiona Crisp, she's there, and with her, they've got some people doing some PhD there, and they have sent some sort of bacteria that does stuff in space, which is interesting. However, there are, like the astronaut thing, she's a nice bitch, she's been in touch with me, well I was in touch with her and she replied, Nicholas Stott, who says astronaut, who made some art in space. It's hideously awful and terrible. It's like an astronaut, it's really bad, but you can look at it, and also Elon Musk and SpaceX sent up, they had a kind of competition where they selected a woman who had tried to become an astronaut and had not become an astronaut. And so they selected her, and she claims she's an artist. She does do, she is better than Nicholas Stott. She does these sort of more like kind of poster art of kind of figures and flowers and things like that. And so it's almost like a little residency. She specifically went up to do art, and they gave her all her art materials and things like that. So there's a cool thing, but obviously they need professional artists up there. There's lots of music and things like that. I think maybe are we kind of coming to the, is there any more questions? Anyway, well thank you all for coming. It's been really